Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College, and I'm here tonight with Natalie Tarangioli. Did I pronounce that correctly, Natalie?
Yeah, that was good. It's a long one. Hi,
Okay. So let me just do a little housekeeping. I'm also going to stream this to Facebook. So let's get that started. And then so while I'm doing all of that, I'd love to know who's here tonight. I assume a lot of you guys are parents of about to be soon freshmen. So I'd love to know where your student's going to school too. So that would be fun to hear. And you know what? I'm going to spotlight Natalie and I'll spotlight myself so it's a little easier for people to see us. And while here people someone's starting at University of Buffalo, University of New Hampshire, Eckerd College, great, USC, Penn State. Okay, wonderful. Other little housekeeping is that this is a Zoom meeting, although it's also being streamed to Facebook, so you might be looking at it that way. If you're watching it through Zoom, please, keep yourself muted unless you want to ask a question. And last time by accident, we had somebody touch the sharing button. So they were sharing their screen and we didn't realize it, but hopefully we can control that now. Let's get started. So tonight we're talking about tuition, primarily tuition insurance, although we're also going to touch on other types of insurance like renter's insurance, a little bit, just some advice about health insurance and a little tidbits about life insurance. But the primary discussion is really to talk about tuition insurance. Natalie works for a company called GradGuard. And I don't know, Natalie, if you can give us a little background about yourself, about GradGuard, and then we can kind of talk about tuition insurance and why people should be interested and what questions that they might have.
Yeah. Thanks, Debbie, for that introduction. And it's great to return here for the third time, GradGuard joining Road to College to talk to all of you about some important topics. And if you were expecting John Fees tonight, our co-founder and managing director, he had an emergency. So hopefully I'm the next best thing here to help you out. So GradGuard is the nation's leading authority on protecting students and families from the risks of college life. And you might think college has no risks, is totally risk-free, and every student graduates. But tonight we'll share a little bit about why that isn't true, not to scare you, but to really help you make an informed decision. So we are the #1 provider of tuition and renters insurance programs to colleges and universities. We help schools educate and protect their students on these risks, and of course, set them up with benefit programs such as insurance. And in my role, I'm the director of marketing and communications. I have a journalism background, so I'm used to communicating these nuanced or sometimes difficult to understand topics to people. So hopefully we'll get some questions answered, get you guys all set up for the fall term, since that's right around the corner.
So I have to say, I mean, honestly, when I went to college many years ago, I don't think my parents even thought about, tuition insurance. So why has it become more important to think about, having that type of insurance? When we send our kids off to college, we're kind of so happy they finally, picked the school. We've done a lot of dorm shopping. We want to move them in, but, why do we need to think about, insuring the potential of them not being able to finish the semester?
Right. And so, college is the second largest investment that most families make. And I think a lot of us realize that, but not really realize the extent of that and what that means. And when we make other large consumer purchases like a house, a car, we're checking the money back guarantee, we're checking the refund policy, or we're also insuring it to make sure that should something go wrong, we get our money back. COVID drew a lot of attention to refund policies and people knowing when they can get some money back due to withdrawal and drop deadlines. But the fact is that many students all over the country have been withdrawing mid-semester long before COVID. So GradGuard's been around since 2009. And even though COVID was a little bit different, where a lot of refunds weren't given just because there was a loss in instruction, a lot of students, they get mono, they have anxiety, they have depression, they have all these common illnesses, many of them rising to the forefront right now with the effects of the pandemic and, this mental health crisis that students are in. So that's really why maybe you're hearing about it now over a few years ago. When I was in school several years ago, this was not a thing at all. And now also too, GradGuard works with over 400 schools. So many of you, I see some of you guys naming your colleges and universities here where you have students attending. Many of these schools now offer tuition insurance. 30 years ago, this was not a thing. 20 years ago, this was not really a thing unless you're attending the Ivy Leagues, the elite schools. They realize the importance of protecting your investment, but people attending state and universities all over the country should really have this opportunity as well.
And actually, I'm curious, anybody who's watching, can you tell us if you've even thought about looking at the refund policy of your college? And if you have, like, what is the refund policy? Again, I can tell you that I never even thought about that. I never even thought that a college would have a refund policy. So I'm curious, Natalie, like, explain what type of refund policies you've seen colleges have, how much do they give back if a student has to withdraw, or do they not give back on the tuition, if a student has to leave mid-semester?
Sure. Yeah, it is kind of a weird thing to think, I need to look this up and see the refund policy. But typically, most schools don't provide any refunds for tuition after the first few weeks. And what you'll see from week 1 to about week 5 is a prorated refund. So, you really have 1 week, if that, for most schools, where you would get all of your money back. This is something that should be available on every school website somewhere around, where they talk about their tuition and when the tuition is due and that sort of a thing. And then beyond that, room and board, academic fees, you wouldn't get your money back in almost all instances if you were to leave. And so we can't predict when a student might need to leave school for a medical reason beyond these first few weeks, but schools really aren't equipped. They're not in a position to give refunds for tens of thousands of dollars left and right. So that's why it's nice to be aware of it, assess if you could pay for an extra semester, and then react accordingly.
So I just see Jessica put in, she said, after a lot of nerves, she looked at the tuition policy, and basically it's only after 2 weeks of school, within the 2 weeks they can get a refund, but after that, not. So it's actually not a lot of time, with which schools are willing to refund. And you mentioned, so are schools, they're potentially refunding some part of the tuition, but they're not necessarily refunding any, room and board costs?
Yeah, and other academic fees, and that's not negligible amounts. That still adds up to all the total. The schools, a lot of them operate like businesses. And so again, they're not really equipped to give those refunds, but it is really unfortunate that a lot of students and parents would be out this money beyond that. And so know your refund policy, tell all the parents in your inner circle to check it, because it's something that should probably be on the homepage of the
I was going to say, where would they find it?
Sometimes it's really buried. I mean, we've even asked some school officials sometimes to point it out to us, and they can't even find it. And so not a knock to schools. We work with a lot of great providers, but they don't want to advertise that you might need to use it. It's like, when you get a long receipt for a big purchase and it says in the small print about refunds and returns, no one wants to scream it from the rooftops. So you might have to do some digging. You might want to try something like your school refund policy in a Google search, like Arizona State refund policy. They're out there, or ask your school to provide that as well, because unfortunately, a lot of students don't return. There was some data out from the National Student Clearinghouse that 1 in 4 students who started school in 2020 at a nonprofit 4-year did not return for 2021. So, I mean, 1 in 4 is huge. Some parents of college freshmen or some of incoming sophomores may know some people who have been like this. You look around the dorms
and what are some reasons why a student might not return, or a student actually might even have to drop out like mid-semester?
Yeah, so I mean, emotional stress is huge. Developing mental health conditions or worsening mental health conditions like anxiety or depression. We have stats from the American College Health Association on the number of students who get mono. 2% of students every year get mono, concussions, If you break a limb or both, God forbid, can't really continue school. So there are a variety of reasons why students withdraw. We're really happy that we cover a lot of those. We help protect a lot of these, including some newer ones. Like we have an epidemic coverage endorsement where an insurance company actually covers epidemics. And, COVID isn't super at the forefront right now, but it is still a cause for concern. Our partner schools do provide mental health protection up to 100% as well. So we're proud of that. It's something that, John, our founder, is really near and dear to him. He's a college parent himself. So it's important work.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about like mental health. Unfortunately, with the pandemic and even kind of before that, there's been an increase in mental health conditions among college students. And I guess what type of issues have you seen, and what also is covered through tuition insurance if my student does have a condition related to mental health, and that's one of the reasons why they need to withdraw?
Yeah, so it's been really eye-opening. It's sad how much these college students are affected by mental health conditions these days, even before the pandemic, but it was really exacerbated by that. And so, GradGuard just sponsored a study with College Pulse on the College Confidence Index and some of these questions related to that. And 1 in 5 students said they knew someone who withdrew from school. And so some of these reasons, we see a lot of anxiety and depression, a lot of mental health conditions. A lot of people have questions because their students may have struggled with this or experienced this in high school, and they want to make sure that their student has the best opportunity. And so with tuition insurance, while it's smart for everyone to at least consider, there are certain stipulations with the product, of course. And so if a student has a controlled chronic condition, so if you have a daughter who had anxiety freshman year and she seemed to be doing better, she got the proper treatment and things cleared up, and senior year, maybe a couple hiccups, but for the most part, she looks really solid to attend college. A doctor cleared her to attend, and you have that documented. If you buy tuition insurance before the start of college and she starts the term and the anxiety comes back and now it's tenfold and she really needs to leave, that would be covered. That would be a protected reason. But if she develops anxiety the first week of school, she has tuition insurance, but really takes a downturn and it doesn't really follow the protocol and the treatment that she had back in the day when the doctor said in this current state, you're allowed to attend, then that's more of a pre-existing condition and it's just a little more of a gray area. And so we get a lot of questions related to that. I know it's sometimes hard to explain for each individual situation, but an analogy that might help is if you have cancer and you get treatment, you get chemo, and you are now in remission, that is different from a pre-existing condition of a cancer diagnosis yesterday. And then you buy the policy because, well, now I have cancer. It's, well, I had cancer, might pick up again, but I'm okay, versus I got cancer today, I better protect myself.
And you had mentioned, we were talking earlier, that there are actually sample policies that might be helpful if people are interested at all in thinking about getting tuition insurance, that they could read through the actual specifics before they make any decisions.
Oh yeah, of course. So we have sample plans online. I know sometimes it's easier to print it out and read some of the language. You can call us. We have some representatives that can explain this as well. You can share some of your own personal story, share it with one of our representatives, and then they can help you decide what's next. They won't push you in one direction either way, but they would say, if this is a situation, then this would happen, and go from there.
So let's talk about, a little bit more the specifics about how you get the tuition insurance, how much is covered. There's actually a question that I got already from a parent who's saying they're going to receive financial aid. Their student also got some outside scholarships. So what would they actually cover for tuition? So they're not paying the full tuition because they're getting financial aid and they're getting scholarships. So can they get a policy for a a portion of the tuition, or does it have to be for the full tuition?
So it would be wise to ensure what would be lost if that term was canceled, right? If your student had to withdraw and then your scholarship would get revoked because there's a certain contingency of that, or if you were to lose out on some of that money, it would sort of expire. That would be smart to ensure. Up to 40,000 is the term limit. And so if your tuition is 20 and you're only paying 5 out of pocket, but your scholarship's guaranteed and all that good stuff, then you'd probably only want to insure that 5,000 because the rest of it's covered in a sense.
Okay.
And to look for tuition insurance, sometimes that's half the battle as well. Maybe you found the refund policy and now you're searching for where the heck to buy this thing. And so you would be wise to ask your school if they have a tuition insurance provider. There are a couple of companies. There's one other one from us that does work with schools to provide this in a more easily accessible way. And of course, it's better coverages and a better price. But beyond that, if your school says we don't work with anybody, then we do offer plans at all colleges and universities for your nonprofit schools on our website. And you can purchase a plan there as well, see what we cover.
And so, and I actually saw this as a comment from somebody in our Facebook group earlier today. They said that the tuition insurance kind of came on the bill and they had to opt out versus other people. They don't know anything about the tuition insurance, or, they have to find out about it on their own, or sometimes it just comes as like an insert in with the physical tuition bill that's sent. So people kind of like need to look all these ways, right, about how the school might be sharing this information.
Yeah, and it is tough when it's coming in a variety of ways or not at all, and you're like, I'm left out, what the heck? So I would say, as long as you're familiar with the term tuition insurance and to look for it, whether you see it or the absence of it somewhere in regards to a piece of marketing material from your school or on their website, it's wise to at least be on alert for it. So if you see it in your bill, GradGuard doesn't do this, but another provider does mostly do an opt-out thing. So that's why that person may have saw that automatically on their bill. And then it would be on them to opt out of it, similar to how student health insurance coverage works. But for us, many of our schools, we are embedded in the technology. So when you're going along with your tuition bill and saying, pay now, let me fork over all this money, let me see what it's going to cost, a window would pop up that says, GradGuard can help protect your investment. And if it's not on your bill or while you're paying your bill as a pop-up, then it may be mentioned on your school website, or then your next step would just say, go to gradguard.com.
Okay. And there's a message and somebody's asking if we can provide the links for sample policies. If you can give them to me after this, Natalie, I'll include it in the follow-up email that we send out tomorrow, so people can look at sample policies.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So maybe if you can explain, because this is really important, about the importance of when you need to buy tuition insurance, because it's not something that honestly, halfway through the semester, you can say, oh yeah, now I want to buy that policy.
Yeah, it's why we have this webinar around the same time every summer. It's because right now parents are putting the finishing touches on, the back to school list. You're rapidly getting things ready for the start of the term. So tuition insurance does have to be purchased the day before classes start. So if your classes start Monday, August 8th.
And some schools are starting pretty soon in the next 2 weeks. Yeah.
It's got to be same day. So it's not, oh my God, I have a class in an hour. No, it's got to be the day before.
Okay, so that's really important. Anybody watching tonight, if you're considering it, do your research in the next, honestly, 2 weeks. And then if it's something you really want to pursue, make sure you purchase it before your students start schools. Mm-hmm. What about student or families that are taking out student loans? Why is it even maybe more important for those families to consider tuition insurance?
Yeah, for these families, taking out student loans is a big decision. That's something that it should be a family decision because it's lasting, even beyond graduation. But the worst situation of all, and it's not all that rare, is when a student doesn't graduate and still has loans. So what GradGuard, what tuition insurance, what that's all about is really getting you to that path of graduation. So whether you're paying for college with the 529 or the student is self-funding it or it is from student loans, you want to make sure you at least get that degree. That is at least some return on your investment. And so if a student were to withdraw and not have tuition insurance and still have these crippling loans, then the only options are to not go back or take out more loans, or you're just kind of stuck. And so for those with student loans, we would say highly consider it, think about it, and then go from there.
Yeah, think about it, because you are taking on the loans. Once they are dispersed to the college, they're going to accrue interest, particularly if they're coming from private lenders. And if your student has to withdraw and you don't have insurance, you are going to have to still pay for the loans because you're paying for the semester, whether your student was able to finish or not.
Yeah. And so wherever the money's coming from, however you're paying for college, it's just really smart to think about, okay, if X were to happen, then what's Y and Z? Everything has consequences.
So Ella is asking, just to confirm, should they buy the policy before the first day of classes or not before the first day of the semester? I guess that might be a little different, like what they consider the first day of semester versus the first day of classes.
Yeah, I guess I'm not really familiar with that because I thought that
it might be when kids can move into the dorm versus when classes actually start.
Oh, okay. So with that, I would call us, talk to one of our representatives, our licensed agents, and confirm for sure. But I would say as long as it's before the first day of classes, because maybe you moved in 2 days ago, but classes are about to start, it ensures your tuition, not necessarily like what you're doing before you go to school, decorating your dorm room or whatever it may be. But if you want to purchase it before the start of the semester and not necessarily classes, then it would be the same thing.
And can you give us an idea of what the cost is of the insurance?
Yeah, so it's about 1% to 2% of what you're insuring. And so if you want to insure $10,000 or 40, it's as low as 1.1%. So if it's $10,000, 110 for the semester.
For the semester, right? Uh-huh.
Oh yeah, and we do offer annual plans as well. But and some people say, oh, it's another fee. It's hard to pay for yet another thing when it comes to college. But when you could spend 110 and insure 10,000, it's kind of a no-brainer. And if you say, well, 10,000 would really cripple me without that, which a lot of us, that would be the case, then that's pretty smart to think about.
Okay. And please, if anybody has more questions about tuition insurance, please put it in. We're going to kind of move on a little bit and talk about other types of insurance that are similar to consider. And another kind of on the lines of tuition insurance in my mind is really the most important. But the second one is renter's insurance. So can you talk about why why as a parent, I might want to consider buying renter's insurance and what it covers and some of the situations that you've seen?
Yes. So a common misconception is, the dorm is an entity of the school, or an off-campus housing apartment is an entity of some other company, and whatever happens, they're fine. And no one wants to think about fires happening or floods or your kid's stuff getting stolen, like your expensive laptop or phone, right? But they do happen. And when most schools don't pay for the cost of stolen or damaged student property, then it's really smart to get. And I know what some of you are thinking, well, my homeowner's insurance probably
I was just going to ask that.
Yeah, it's always the next question that follows. And I'm not saying you're wrong to automatically think that, but the fact is most of the top homeowners insurance companies don't always cover students. So I'm sure some of you.
So check. So people need to check that first.
Yeah, I just wouldn't automatically assume. And then if they do, you probably have a really high deductible, whereas college renters insurance plans like ours, a deductible is $100. It wouldn't make your rates go up. There's other student exclusive features such as no credit check and monthly payment plans that are really unique for college students. But beyond that, I would not automatically assume your homeowners will cover your student.
And like what types of things, or like what situations have you seen where things that happen on campus? Like, well, like why do people put in claims?
There's a lot of reasons. So a lot of stolen bikes. That's pretty common on college campuses, and you need that to get around college. Your laptop gets stolen. But then we also see some of these really costly claims where a student hangs a dress from the sprinkler head in your dorm room, and before you know it, 9 units are flooded, and all of the stuff that these students had in these dorm rooms are totally damaged. And not to mention the walls are starting to get mold of the dorm. The cost goes up into the tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so where it's something kind of small, like this one member who got their laundry stolen, and it's the cost of a few $100s to replace some clothes. When you're talking a claim of over $100,000 because the actual student housing building was damaged, that's where GradGuard would really help, because it's stuff that's like, you can't even believe it happened, but it happens.
Mm-hmm. And what about, there's even like more minor situations, like you once explained to me about the story of somebody's laundry getting stolen.
Yeah. There's just this guy studying in his dorm room. I asked him what happened because I saw we paid a claim. And so I asked about his experience, and he said he's studying for finals and he's doing some laundry. And you know how students in the dorms have only a couple laundry facilities to use, and you leave it there and you go back as soon as your timer says to go get your clothes. He goes back and all his clothes are gone. He sees like a trail of a sock or underwear, whatever it may be. But in that situation, now he has no clothes. He wasn't even sure we would cover that, but luckily we did. And you hear these situations and you think, maybe that happens to one student ever, but it happens. And we've seen other claims come in for stolen laundry. So not to have your alerts on high for that, but it exists.
And talk a little bit about, our kids go to school now with so many tech gadgets that, and they're expensive. And we were just talking about this before we got on, how our kids can be walking around with like $2,500 worth of items, and between the phone and their laptop and AirPods. It's everybody's backpack is actually pretty expensive. And probably it's also not infrequent that things get stolen as students, leave their things on a library table and go to the bathroom, or even out of a dorm itself. So maybe explain like what gets covered, and also what other types of policies families might be interested in, that are just like maintenance versus stolen.
Right. Yeah. And I think renter's insurance does complement some of these other policies out there, like Apple Care or something with accident protection, because whereas you don't want to pick one over the other necessarily, say you get Apple Care because your kid only has Mac stuff and they cover accidents. Sure. Then what happens when they hang a dress from their sprinkler head and the dorm room's flooded? And so I think there are a lot of policies that complement this. And you're right, these backpacks have thousands of dollars worth of items. And if you were to file a claim against your homeowner's insurance, it's probably the cost of your deductible. So you may as well just pay for that out of pocket, but then that still hurts you financially. And so it's worth protecting.
So what's the cost of like a renter's insurance?
The plans are about $12 a month. So depending on the state and the school and some of these limitations, some of these states are more in hurricane zones, for example. So everything's going to be different, but it's about $12. I know we at one point had a marketing or a social media post about how it's about the cost of a Chipotle burrito bowl per month. And it's covered everywhere. So if your student's studying abroad and something gets stolen, or
actually, that's a really good point about studying abroad. That's when a lot of these things also kind of happen.
Oh yeah. And personal liability as well. So if if your student comes home for break and something happens to them there, whether it's something to them or something is stolen from them or whatever it may be, or they're away from school and their dorm room is damaged and they're not even there. These are all situations we see. The one with the girl with the dress from the sprinkler head, this was over winter break. And so only a few students were there. And imagine your student stuff is affected. You didn't even hang the dress, but then you're like, well, what the heck? I have no involvement. I don't even know this person who hung the dress. And So that's something where thankfully we were able to help them out.
So, so renter's policy is about, let's say $12 a month. And how much does that usually cover? And what's the deductible on those types of policies?
Yeah, so that's something that can change, but the deductible is as low as 100. And you could toggle it just like other companies, as well as the policy limits for coverages that you want. But with the deductible as low as 100 and no credit check, filing a claim will not increase your premiums, or you won't get any dings or anything like that. We also have a feature where if, for example, your homeowner's policy is pretty robust and your student does come home for the summer, you could pause your renter's insurance policy, although it's fairly inexpensive and you never really want to drive up that deductible anyways for the homeowners. So there are certain features that are covered, and we have a sample plan of that as well that I'll send.
Okay.
Yeah, it's important that this isn't accident protection. This isn't I think I maybe broke my laptop because of my own negligence, like I spilled a glass of water or something. It was stolen, a police report was filed, that sort of thing.
And again, what's the timing involved of when you need to purchase renter's insurance?
So this one's a little more flexible. It's not like tuition insurance where it has to be before the term starts. It could be whenever, at any point in the semester, but of course it does have to happen before the loss occurred. So, you can't have your dorm room flood and then think to call GradGuard. It really has to be a little premeditated.
Okay. I'm just backtracking a little bit because there's a question that somebody sent me. Maybe if we can review the pre-existing conditions, particularly for mental health. And this person is just, as an example, saying that what if a student has previously seen a therapist, but then they stopped and they go to school, but something kind of reoccurs. Where does that condition, where's that example fall, relative to pre-existing versus controlled?
Right. And so this is stuff that I would encourage everyone who has questions like this to call us directly and work through this with a representative. But I would say what it sounds like is, as long as a doctor told them they were medically cleared to start school, within a certain window before school, and it changes depending on what school they're attending, whether it's 60 days or 120 days before the start date. If a doctor said you had this condition in the past, but you're A-okay to start, then that would be more of a controlled chronic.
And sorry to interrupt, when you say, so should they need to get that documented? Is that true? So in this case, the student might have seen a therapist, they stopped, they seem to be fine, but before they go to college, they should kind of get that documentation that it basically says whoever they saw believes that this student, is fine to attend college.
Yes, and because in the event that something does happen, which you don't hope that it does, but that's just having your stuff ready in the event of the unexpected. It's just like with renter's insurance, you save your receipts, you take pictures of your stuff, because anything to expedite a claim, especially with tuition insurance, when probably something really traumatic and difficult and stressful for the entire family is happening, you don't want to say, where the heck is that doctor's note from months ago?
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So the bottom line is we will send links to sample policies, but if you have specific questions, and it's okay, and everybody has uniquenesses to their situations, that they should contact GradGuard. They can talk to somebody, explain their situation, and get advice as to how that would be, to how their particular situation would be clarified, so that they can make a decision before purchasing the tuition insurance and feel comfortable whether or not their situation might be covered if the unexpected were to happen.
Yep.
Okay, so let's see. There's another question here. If you keep the insurance year round and your student moves their belongings into a storage unit during the summer break, are there things covered while in storage and not in a dorm room? Do we need to notify the insurance company of the storage unit address? That's a great question. So basically, if their stuff is being moved, and it's no longer in the dorm, is it still covered?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. That is a great question. That came up a lot with COVID too, with people moving out haphazardly. And so,
but this is a great question, because again, I know my own kids, we stored their stuff over the summer with the storage company. It came back, it was okay. But there were stories that we heard where a box was lost, or, something came back moldy or broken. So it happens.
Yeah, and we have worldwide property coverage, so that's maybe a peace of mind that whether the storage unit is even in this country or outside the country, it's covered. I don't believe you need to notify the insurance company that of the storage unit address, but I do know that if you were formerly insuring a dorm room and then they move off campus, you would want to notify them about that address change. It's not a big deal at all. But it's probably good practice to say, this is where my stuff's at, or have that record that they were in storage to begin with.
Okay, so there's two more types of insurance we're just going to touch on. And actually, these are insurance that GradGuard doesn't even provide, but we just feel it's important as this whole discussion about insurance that we should talk about it. And okay, wait. Oh, before we move on, there's a question. So we'll stick to the tuition insurance for a little bit longer. Elizabeth is asking, can you give more specifics about the epidemic clause? Does it only cover if kids get COVID and withdraws? What if a student doesn't want to continue if classes are online?
Excellent question, Elizabeth. So we saw this a lot in March 2020 when all the colleges shut down and people were looking for refunds. So with the epidemic endorsement coverage, or the epidemic coverage endorsement rather, it all applies to if a student medically withdraws. So that doesn't cover change in instruction. God forbid something were to happen again and we all have to quarantine and not limit or limit our time outside rather, and colleges shut down. So that would not be covered if we had that change in instruction again. Or if your student says, you know, I don't like this campus very much, I want to leave. There are a lot of things like that where that full medical withdrawal has to come into play for GradGuard to even really consider this type of claim.
So they have to really, they could still get COVID, unfortunately, but they have to withdraw from classes. They can't just, if they are now taking classes online and they don't like that, but they're medically capable of continuing classes, that's not necessarily something that's covered. They have to actually say, I can no longer go to school and I'm medically withdrawing.
Right. Just like other illnesses like anxiety or depression, you know, you could have some anxiety, but be well enough to go to school, versus if it's so bad, you need to withdraw. That's something that's covered.
Okay. So, the other two insurances we just want to touch on so that, you know, people think about it is health insurance. I'm sure families have seen in the tuition bills that they've gotten, a lot of schools bill you or they include it on the bill because until you prove to them that your student has insurance, they're not going to take it off the bill. I don't know, Natalie, if you have any comments, just advice for people about health insurance.
Yeah, I would say the thing people get frustrated with the most with this situation when it's automatically on the bill until you prove it is a lot of people don't know about this, and then they have duplicate coverage, and no one likes to spend any more money than you have to, you know, whether you have more policies than you actually need. So, you know, your student can be covered with your health insurance until they're 26. Check terms and conditions if there are any other stipulations in that matter. But for the most part, if they're attending school that's far away from home and out of state, and maybe your insurance really won't cover them out there, that's something that's probably worth going with is the student insurance that the school provides, and your student health department can provide more information. It's pretty affordable too, but just really make sure that you're not paying for two, and that if you need to opt out, have that proof of insurance and provide it.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with everything Natalie said. I guess the thing I would emphasize is just make sure, look at your actual health insurance policy. Some families that I've you know, talked with and helped, they didn't act, depending on where their student was going to college, the health policy didn't cover like out of state, or it was limited. It was different types of coverage out of state. So just know what the coverage is going to be for where your student is, and make that decision about whether you truly don't need it, and then show proof to the college, or you might want to take the college's insurance depending on the cost and depending on what your policy covers or not. But point is, look into it, and you know, and just make a decision one way or the other. And again, don't get charged twice, because some of these policies, it's a few $1,000s for the year. So
yeah, and that could be put towards a lot of other things, so you don't want to do that.
And the last insurance that I'll just bring up is related to life insurance. And again, as a parent, I know that some people say, oh, my kid is 18 and I don't need to, they are self-sufficient, and I don't necessarily need to continue my life insurance. But I will unfortunately say that I've had, personal, close friends where a spouse has died. And I encourage families to think about continuing their life insurance, at least until their student is through college, because if God forbid something happens, particularly to the, prime income earner, a student might not be able to have the money to continue college. So you just want to think about those types of backup plans, and it's 4 more years of life insurance that might be really worthwhile to have peace of mind to know that if something happens, to you and you're not around and you can't continue to help your student pay for college, then at least they have, something from life insurance that can help them with that. So something to think about, because I know, again, a lot of families are just like, oh, they're 18, I don't need to pay for the life insurance anymore, but it might be worthwhile for 4 more years. Okay. Any questions that anybody has about any insurance? Feel free to put it into chat. We will send a link to this recording tomorrow. We will also send a link to the policies, which I think is great for people to look at, specifically, Natalie. And again, I just encourage people it's just kind of like the last effort, before I'm getting in the car, packing things up and sending them to college. It's just a little bit more research that needs to get done. Research to know what your school's refund policy is. Do they offer any sort of, tuition insurance with any of the providers? If not, you can contact GradGuard directly and get tuition insurance. Think about renter's insurance, whether or not your homeowners covers it or what the deductible is versus it's so reasonable. What you just said, $12 a month, to cover all these potential, things. And believe me, again, as a parent of a student, I actually been lucky that they haven't gotten any of these situations, but I've had a lot of friends who, particularly laptops being stolen, unfortunately, students just walk away and don't realize, they might be in a coffee shop, or they walk out and they leave their backpack someplace, they go back and it's no longer there. So, this is the unexpected, but it happens. Also, I will say, particularly, I had a student go abroad. There are situations that happen, while they're abroad, because it's a completely new surrounding and settings and a foreign country, and things get lost. So, or not, they get stolen. They leave things on a train. I've heard that way too often. So just spend a little bit longer for the next week, research all of these tuition issues, and feel free to send us questions, or particularly call GradGuard to explain your situation and to get more details. So there's a question for renters insurance. Do most people choose to have liability coverage under it?
Yeah, with GradGuard, that is in the policy itself, which is unique because there are other companies that do provide more accident coverage, or they're very personal property coverage protected. But I think it's a no-brainer that replacing the cost of your phone is a lot easier than the cost of your damaged dorm room. And so when you're shopping around at policies, make sure they have both. That's not something that I would assume the school would cover. And we see that all too frequently, unfortunately. Something happens to the dorm room, it was the student's fault, sure. I mean, one that comes to mind is the University of Buffalo, I believe it was a few years ago, where she accidentally set fire to her dorm room. I think it was a candle or some heater or something like that. And she had to withdraw because the cost of the damages was just too much. And then your child is sent to collections, and it's just a lost cause at that point. That's a link that I can send as well. And you hear about that stuff all the time. Some student at BYU had a rocket fuel explosion. He was making rocket fuel in his dorm room. What if your student isn't living next door to him, you know?
Wow. I'm sure you guys have a lot of crazy stories that you hear.
To say the least. And for all of this too, like, this is not to scare anyone or to really think, you know, you're a bad person for not knowing some of this stuff before. Tuition insurance, renter's insurance for your college student, it's something that I think is just gaining more popularity as more people know about it, know about the risks. And it's, if you were to consider these policies or even get some with other providers, it's not that you don't trust your student or you think something that unexpected would happen. It's just really good practice to protect it.
So there's another question here, and maybe you can go over it a little bit again. It's this kind of this definition or distinguishing between if a student actually has to withdraw, or, and related it probably, you know, to COVID or the pandemic, or if there's just a change in the way the college is offering instruction. So a college, and you know, it may happen again. My own son, the beginning of spring semester, yeah, a lot of schools did this last year. They said, we're gonna do online learning or online teaching for the first two weeks. You know, so they have the option, a college has the option to change the way that they offer instruction. So just maybe explain again the distinction between if a college makes that change of, you know, how they're going to offer the instruction, or if your student gets sick and their option is they're still able to take classes, but it's online, you know, versus they truly have to withdraw, you know, what is covered.
Yeah, so that medical withdrawal does have to come into play. So even if the student, you know, has something medical that comes up and they can switch the instruction or they reduce their workload or whatever it may be, that's still not the full medical withdrawal. So essentially some condition would have to happen, medical injury or illness, where a doctor says you were best to leave school, then that's where that coverage would come into play. So I know it's hard to say that, you know, online school, it's not the same as in person, but if that stuff happens, that's just not something tuition insurance covers.
Okay, so it really is, you know, a student has to be medically not capable of continuing classes. It's not that the school, you know, if hopefully not, but if things get worse again with, you know, COVID or something else, and the school says we have to switch to online learning, that's not something that families can ask for refunds for.
Right, yeah. And it's not dropout insurance. It's not, I wish I went to a different school instead insurance.
Right.
Yeah. Or all my classes are online now and I hate this. I get it. It's not fun, but yeah, medical is key here.
Okay. Okay, well, again, anybody have any questions? You know, let's put it in the chat, but if not, or you can send me a question, questions at Debbie at Rhodes College, and we will either forward it on to Natalie, or if we can answer them directly. But I encourage everybody to get answers to these questions from their school about, you know, refund policies. We know that it's only going to be for a few weeks, and consider whether or not you want to move forward with tuition insurance. If you do, buy it for the first day of classes. Consider renter's insurance, and absolutely look into health insurance and what your health insurance is covering your student, and make sure you waive what, if you need to, waive what's on the bill. And my personal one is please continue life insurance for a few years, just for the absolutely worst situation, to make sure that your student can continue if something happens to you. Thank you, Natalie.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was great having you. And I know that you provided a lot of good information for everybody watching and for everybody who will be watching, because we get a lot of people watching over the next few days. And thank you, everybody, for being here tonight.
Yeah, thank you. We have some more stats and information that parents might find useful. We just released that study called College Confidence Index. So I'll put this in the chat right there. And then if you have any questions directly, you know, like Debbie said, you can email her or you can email me directly as well. and I'll try to help. I got a couple questions last year, even some just a couple months ago, someone had saved my email. So that was kind of nice. And hopefully I can help you guys out, but thank you for your time.
That's great. And Natalie, you'll send me, we'll follow up and we'll get some of these links to sample policies, and we will include them in the follow-up email tomorrow.
Yes, you got it.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.